following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Yo, Philly, how yous doing? Welcome to Philadelphia Baseball, past, present, and personal. I'm Bill Kashatus, your host on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. On Saturday, April 18th, 1987, the Phillies were playing the Pirates at Pittsburgh's Three Rivers Stadium. Entering the top of the ninth, the Fightins were down 6-5 with 2 runners aboard and 2 outs. Mike Schmidt stepped to the plate. Schmidt ran the count to 3-0 and got the green light. Let's let Harry Kalas take it from there.
Here's the stretch by Robinson. The 3-0 pitch. Swing a long drive. There it is. Number 500. A career 500th home run for Michael Jack Schmidt. And the Phillies have regained the lead at Pittsburgh. 8-6. And the Phillies dugout comes swarming out to home plate.
Boy, what a time. What a time to pick for number 500. The whole dugout's out there. You don't see Schmidt get very emotional going around the bases on a home run. He jumped on second with both feet. He banged his fist high around third base. The whole bullpen now is coming out.
Not too shabby for a 37-year-old veteran who began his career 14 years earlier as a 23-year-old rookie with a 196 batting average and just 18 home runs in 132 games. Over the course of an 18-year Hall of Fame career, Michael Jack won 3 Most Valuable Player awards, 8 National League home run titles, 6 Silver Slugger awards, 4 RBI titles, and 10 Gold Gloves. Although Schmidt became a better hitter for average late in his career, he was better known for the home run, 548 of them to be exact. On this podcast, Mike joins us to discuss those homers, along with Bill Jenkinson, Major League Baseball's home run historian. Bill is also a consultant to the National Baseball Hall of Fame and author of 2 books, The Year Babe Ruth Hit 104 Home Runs and Baseball's Ultimate Power, ranking the all-time greatest distance home run hitters. Well, Mike's with us. Mike, welcome back to the podcast. I think Bill's going to be joining us a bit later.
Yeah, good evening, Bill. Nice to be with you, and I hope this isn't going to be a test of my home run memory.
Not too much.
When you get to be 70 years old, your memory on everything's not too good.
Hey, yeah.
But we'll see.
Yep. Well, look, I got to begin by asking, what was the most memorable of those 548 career home runs? Was it the 500th?
Geez, you get those questions about the most important memory of your career and, the most important memorable home run you hit. And truthfully, Billy, there's a lot of answers to those questions. I mean, it depends on the moment. I guess if you really look at it, probably the biggest home run that I hit throughout my career was probably in 1980 in Montreal, the first game of a 3-game series where my home run beat the Expos. Of course, we had to get him out in the bottom of that inning and leave that to Tug McGraw for sure, who was very instrumental in our success in 1980. But for me personally, that probably was my biggest home run. It was a home run that, at the time when the team really needed it, you would call it a clutch home run. Philadelphia fans, I'm sure, looked at it as that. For me, I guess, in terms of postseason play, it was a big thing for me personally. Having gotten a hit that literally started us off on the right foot in a series in Montreal that we had to win to get into the postseason. So I think that was my biggest home run of my career. Of course, there's a lot of really close seconds to that, but if I could point to one that meant the most to me and our team, it was that one.
I certainly remember that one, but I got to admit that for myself, the most memorable came on April 6, 1974, opening day of the 74 season. Phils were playing the Mets at Veterans Stadium, and entering the bottom of the ninth, The Phillies were behind 4-3. With one out and one on, you stepped to the plate and hit a walk-off home run against who else but the Tugger to win the game 5-4. And it was so memorable for me because I was a 13-year-old kid and was sitting along the third baseline that day, and that homer was the most memorable for me because it was at that moment that I adopted you as my hero. Of course, Tug joined you in Philadelphia the following season. Did you ever kid him about that home run?
Oh, yeah, sure. And, you know, Billy, that home run for me was right there in the top 5 because it really turned my career around. You know what I went through in 1973, the previous year. You mentioned it in the opening, the 196 batting average, the poor stats, in Ozark's doghouse the entire year. I very, very easily could have had to stay in AAA that year, but I went to the big leagues with the team and had a pretty good spring training, and all of a sudden, my year, if you can imagine, my outlook on myself as a player and everyone of me as a player actually turned around. Opening day, a walk-off home run against, if I'm not mistaken, the Mets were in the World Series the previous year.
73, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, and so that set a tone. I mean, for me, that probably set a tone if you can imagine for the rest of my career. I mean, who knows if that home run, we never know about our lives, but, you know, that home run just put me on cloud 9.
Mm-hmm. I think Bill Jenkinson.
Just want to let you know.
Yeah, Bill. As long as we're talking about Schmidt's most memorable homers, you've researched every one of his 548 home runs by distance, pitcher, and impact on the game. What do you consider his most memorable homer?
Well, Mike, thanks for letting me join in here. And I heard your answer.
Yeah, nice to
already.
be with you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Mike.
by the way. Thanks for that. That study, I'm to understand that you are the one who authored that, and I think it's pretty incredible. I mean, I've gone through it at length.
Well, thank you, Mike. It was a pleasure. My take, Bill and Mike, on Mike's most memorable, I went through every one of them, and I listed 5, and I'll do them really quickly. The 500th, of course. Not only was it a historic number, but it won a ball game. One, of course, wasn't a home run, and the epic single off of the speaker hanging from the roof at the Houston Astrodome. I personally think a lot of people like to look back on the 4th home run of Mike's day in April of '76. That also won a ball game, and it was his 4th home run in one game. He's already talked about the Montreal home run, which I have listed here, so obviously I agree with that. And then the one that won the LCS game in 1983 in Dodger Stadium for Steve Carlton. Mikey hit that one off of Royce and won the game, held up, and he won the game 1-0. So those are the 5 that come. Those are the 5 that come to my mind.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that 4 home run game against the Cubs. That was April 17th, 1976. 2 off Rick Russell in innings 5 and 7, 1 off Mike Garman in the 8th, and the last one on Paul Russell, Rick's brother, in the 10th inning. And what was so interesting to me about those circumstances was that entering the game, Mike was batting 167 with just 1 homer, 2 RBIs, and 9 strikeouts and 18 at-bats. And Danny Ozark, who was the manager, dropped him from 3rd in the batting order to 6th that afternoon. And you know, it resonates because this is what Gabe Kapler was doing, you know, all over the place with Rhys Hoskins this year when he was struggling at the plate. Mike, do you think that change got you out of that funk, enabled you to hit those homers by taking the pressure off?
It could have had an effect. In the case of Rhys Hoskins, I mean, I know Rhys had to move around the batting order a little bit, but it was never past 4th in the batting order. It was either 2nd or 3rd or 4th.
Right.
But in my case, yes, he did. He dropped me behind Dick Allen, I believe, who was hitting fifth at the time. Of course, Lazinski fourth, and Bake and Pete, not Pete, excuse me, but Larry Bull was up there. And, I was dropped for the first time, deservedly so, as you had mentioned. I was pressing. We went to Chicago. We got a beautiful day, wind blowing, breeze out, nice April day. I actually grabbed a bat that felt good in BP, Tony Taylor's name on it, so it was Tony's bat. Went out, Dick Allen and I had a little chat before the game. He wanted to ease the tension on me a little bit and get a smile back on my face, and he did well with that. I actually started the game out, I believe, with a pop-up, and then I got a little single between third and short, and then the barrage started after that. So it was a good day for home runs. A couple of the line drive home runs probably would not have gone out of some ballparks, but they were good at Wrigley Field. And then, man, I tell you what, it just seemed like when I swung the bat, the ball went on the right trajectory, and the wind made it carry. The wind wasn't holding any balls up that day. So, and the final one was a big one. I think it won the game either 15-14 or 14-13. I forget which, but yeah, the final one was a game win. So, that was definitely a day to remember. All four of those are somewhere in the, that day for sure was in the top five for me.
That game certainly kick-started your season because you went on a homer in 6 of the next 8 games. You finished April with 11 home runs, something that put you on the cover of the May 3rd issue of Sports Illustrated. By the end of May, you were hitting .308 and locked in a tight race for the home run title with Dave Kingman of the Mets. And, of course, you went on to win your third straight NL home run crown that year with 38. And there are...
and if I might mention, if I'm not mistaken, I think we won like 50-some games out of the next 60, out of the next 70. We went on a tear in 76 like you wouldn't believe after that game.
Mm-hmm. And you were mentioning the opening day 74 home run is one that really puts you on the map. There are a lot of historians that say that the 1976 season elevated you to superstar status and paved the way for your Hall of Fame career. Do you agree with that assessment?
I wouldn't go that far, Bill. I don't think the Hall of Fame came into play until after 1980, 81, and on into. I think maybe that was solidified into the 86 season. Of course, the third MVP surely helped, but no, I think you're way too early on thinking Hall of Fame after the 1976 season. There's some nice numbers for sure. I mean, like you said, leading the league in home run a few times. Back then, you could lead the league with 36, 35 home runs. And, that's how that happened. They weren't hitting, home runs in the 45s and 50s back then. But, no, I think you're a little early on the Hall of Fame speculation.
Bill, you certainly have seen plenty of Schmidt's home runs over the 18 years that he played. Describe a Mike Schmidt home run for us, and I'm not talking about your Harry Kalas impression here, but rather, what did the trademark Schmidt home run look like if there was one? Was it a line drive? What did it look like?
Well, I've looked everything over, Bill and Mike, and I don't see a trademark pattern there. As I said, looked at all 548 in his 50 spring training home runs, the 5 postseason home runs, and 4 and then 1 All-Star home run. And I think Mike hit just about as many line drive home runs as towering high home runs. It seems like a pretty good mix. I think maybe Mike could join in on that. He would know best.
Bill, that's a good description. I couldn't either explain my home runs. I think my home runs were a potpourri of a little bit of everything, and a lot of it had to do with my change over the years, my changing my hitting styles, my mechanics, my swing speed, where I stood in the batter's box. I went through a period from, say, 79 through 83, well, even through through the rest of my career after about 79, where I started to use whole field. I hit a lot of balls to right center field. Early in my career, I was predominantly a pull hitter. I don't really think there's any pattern. For example, maybe if you could look at today's Phillies team, if you look at Rhys Hoskins' home runs, there's a strong pattern from center field around to the left field line. I mean, I don't think Rhys at this point had a high enough, which I hope he develops as time goes on, but a high enough percentage of home runs hit to the right center field side of the field. Bryce Harper, probably the same, given that our ballpark's so small in Philadelphia. Both of the hitters, if they would use the entire field more often, would hit, maybe 10 to 15 more home runs per season. So, yes, if you were asked to describe Bryce Harper's home run pattern, or Rhys Hoskins, you might have a little bit easier time than try to describe mine. Of course, they have a smaller sample at this point. Mm-hmm. I have quite a bit larger sample, but simplest way would be early in the career was predominantly pull. Later in the career, it was using the whole field and then more line drives. Early in the career, probably more long fly balls. Later in the career, probably more line drive home runs. But I will say this: I did not hit a lot of long home runs. You mentioned the one in the Astrodome. I think in the old vet, I think I had one S in the upper deck in left field, and it was a decal they put on seats in the upper deck that home runs landed on. And I know Luzinski had 4 or 5 up there. Starchel had one way up in the right field seat. So, I did not hit long, high home runs they talk about. If they talk about launch angle and distance they fly nowadays and the speed and of balls hit, I would not have rung the bell on those very well when I played.
Well, I have something to say about that, Bill and Mike. I think Mike is being unduly modest about his optimum power. And I'm looking at a list right now, and including balls that hit high off the foul pole that would have gone into the 500 level. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6. He's got 8 of them at the vet. Wow. And Mike,
how do you find these things out, Bill?
Great question.
Well, a lot of them I saw, Mike. I wasn't active as a historian until 1979. And, of course, you were well into your career, but it took me a few years to figure out just what I was doing. So when I saw your home runs, I didn't log them in on a daily basis. But by the early 80s, I did have an idea where I was going, and then I would see most of them, and then I would just log them, and I have it all here. And some of it is just going back with the first-hand accounts filed by the newspapers. It's a lot easier to do that kind of research now, because back in the old days you'd have to actually physically go to a library, but now you can do most of that in your home just to do it online. But,
Bill, you mentioned...
Yeah, but you could take somebody like Dave Kingman. He was basically all-out home run hitter on every swing. I mean, I'm not saying that he lost his balance when he swung, but, for his entire career he swung, and he had a home run swing. I fought swinging for the home run most of my career because I truly believe that a home run swing seldom produced a home run. Does that make sense?
Sure it does.
A home run swing produces a swing and miss. It produces a lot of high flies. It produces a lot of foul balls, and it leads to strikeouts, which is my argument today when I'm on TV or when I'm talking hitting with somebody. It says the better results for home runs come when you're not swinging for the home run. Simply put, there's so many beautiful home runs hit with 2-strike counts, and not so many beautiful home runs hit with 2-0 counts. Just because the batters shorten their swing and they're trying to make contact. And most of my career, I fought trying to swing for home runs, and I didn't like missing my pitch. And I tried to learn a batting stroke that would put my pitch in play more often because I wanted to be a better hitter, and I think that's what, that's the path to better hitting is not striking out so much, which I did in the 86 and 87 season, cutting my strikeouts almost down into the 80s from what was generally a 145 or 150 number for me. And my batting average jumped to 295 both of those years, and I maintained all my other statistics, but I was a better hitter. I could drive that run in on second base with 2 outs. So, I mean, that's kind of my beef with today's hitters. Mm-hmm. They're not so much concerned about what happens between the home run and the strikeout. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me, Mike, but you should keep in mind, I think, in fairness to yourself, that the fact that you didn't swing as hard as you could all the time, and yet you still have a documented history of several home runs over the 460-foot plateau, all the way up into the low 480s, which is very impressive, and I think that it speaks well of your optimum power, because there you are. You're telling us you're the guy who made the swings, and you're telling us that in order to become a better hitter, you didn't swing as hard as Dave Kingman, and yet look what you did. And by the way,
well, I appreciate that, and that very well could be the truth, and I'd rather sell myself short than oversell myself, but sometimes you have a memory of what you went through as a hitter. I'm 70 years old, and when I watch today's hitters and I look back and I say, man, I could never have done that, or that's amazing, I just don't feel that in my body anymore that I could do that. It's been so long ago, and that feeling it just makes you start to think that you were different. It's so much different nowadays than it was when we played.
Mm-hmm. I want to tell a quick story because I think the listeners would enjoy it. By the mid-'80s, I was into what I was doing as a historian, and Larry Shank connected me with Mike for an interview in the clubhouse. And, Mike, you were very gracious to me. But just as you are now, you were very modest back then. And when I told you I was there to talk to you about your longest home runs, as I said, you're very gracious. But you said, you ought to be talking to Dick Allen and Greg Lazinski, not me. And yet, here you are.
Yeah, I mean, they still talk about some balls that Dick Allen hit. I mean, I still hear stories about. You ever hear the one about him hitting a line drive through Seaver's legs and it went over the center field's fence?
Yeah,
I've heard it. It's apocryphal.
Yeah,
it didn't happen.
One thing.
But I can tell you that he. Go ahead.
One thing that Mike might be interested in, Bill, and we've talked about this, given the fact that he wasn't like Dave Kingman, always swinging from the heels. There are certain abilities that power hitters, home run hitters have, hand-eye coordination. Yes, there's an element of strength, but you identified a unique tendency in Mike's swing.
Yes.
You want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, and I'd like to hear Mike then react to it. When I observed Mike's career, the thing that impressed me the most was his ability to consistently accelerate the bat head through the point of contact. I mean, most people, rightly, I think, look at just centering the bat on the ball as the hardest thing to do. But in my judgment, right behind that is the ability to actually accelerate the bat head through the point of contact. And I believe that Mike did that better than any power hitter of his era. Keeping in mind that these are major
that's
league
interesting,
hitters.
Bill. If somebody asked me the question, where did you get your power? Mm-hmm. I could answer that now much better than I could back when I played. When I played, hitters talked about wrists. He's got strong wrists. He's got strong forearms. Wrists and forearms and hands. We kind of hunted the ball with our hands. Guys were real handsy. When you think about Henry Aaron, you think about a guy with unbelievable wrist stacking right through the ball. He was known for his wrists. He wasn't known for he wasn't known for a great core, a real strong core and a turn of the core and the big muscles of the body through the ball to propel the bat. He basically hit with strong wrists and very active wrists is where he got his bat speed. And think about that, Henry Aaron with his number of home runs and the equipment he played with, and there's a guy that was more of a handsy hitter, which everybody was. You talk about golf, everybody was a handsy swinger in golf back in those days. Handsy putters, the little pop putt stroke everybody had. And over time, up until today, people now understand how staying inside the ball and allowing the core to turn the bat, the bat head through the ball to create bat speed is a better way to hit. And I was more of a handsy guy, and I wish I hadn't been, to tell you the truth. I wish I had been more of a core hitter, someone that basically didn't stride much, and I just kind of turned my, almost like a Rendon. Now I think he's really going to light up in the playoffs here as he goes, because he's a stationary hitter that can take the bat head to the ball as fast as anyone I've ever seen in the history of the game. And, it's just a little, quick stroke to the ball led by his core. He can get his bat head to anything faster than anybody I've ever seen. And, I think I had a little of that. I think I had real strong wrists and forearms and sense for where the ball was and the head of my bat. I didn't break many bats. I could put the ball on the sweet spot of the bat maybe better than anybody. Now I'm starting to blow my own horn, but but I just felt that was something that I could do. Now I missed the damn ball a lot, and I popped it up a lot, and I got better at it as my career went on. But I was kind of a different kind of hitter, and of course we have no idea what bat head speed we had back in those days because we didn't have any way of seeing it or showing it like they do now. But the ball jumped off of my bat, and basically I think it has a lot to do with those things: wrists, hands, and tremendous hand-eye coordination. Well, and timing. Mike, you got to throw timing in there.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about an account that's
let me add one last thing, Bill. Bills, okay. Plural.
Yep.
I talked to Ted Williams one time at length about hitting. Just Ted and I, only ones in the room. And it must have been for an hour. And I was so cocky at that point about hitting. I tried to explain to him how I hit the baseball. And I was telling him that the right way to hit the baseball is using your top hand. Basically, what I was explaining to him was I have a tendency to hit out around the ball. Now, do you know what I mean by that?
I do.
Yeah, you're not staying inside the ball.
Exactly. I did exact opposite. I tried to hit, using my top hand, driving out and around the ball, which prevents you from using the whole field. It makes you a predominantly pull hitter.
That's right.
And Ted, we all know Ted's theory is a slight uppercut, hands inside the ball, top hand underneath at impact. And I said, Ted, that's not the way. Here I am telling Ted Williams that it's not the way to hit. If I could ever live a day over in my life, it would be that day.
How did he treat you?
I'm 70 years old now. I'm sitting here telling you that was the most idiotic day I ever had in my life. And I believe 100% now that Ted Williams' theories on hitting are still the exact science. They still are the exact science.
Well, he still puts you in his Hitters Hall of Fame, Mike. So
yeah, I know, but I think
right.
I'm like number 24 or 25. I think I'm kind of the last one on the list.
How did he receive that observation of yours?
Well, I mean, he didn't necessarily say, "All right, I believe you. I'll change my mind on this whole thing." No, he just said, something like, "Yeah, well, you'll learn. You'll come around." I didn't know it was going to take me till I was 70 to come around, but I've come around.
Well, I gotta ask you about this account because it's out there floating around, and it has nothing to do with your MLB career. But there is an account out there that when you were playing shortstop at Ohio University between 1968 and 71. You hit a homer that glanced off Grover Center, the 3-story basketball gymnasium that sat beyond the left field fence of old Trotwine Field where the Bobcats played. Now, that shot was roughly 430 feet from where home plate used to be on that diamond. But the legend holds that your homer traveled 500 feet, a distance that would be the equivalent of knocking a ball onto the roof of Old Tiger Stadium or hitting a house on the other side of Waveland Avenue across from Chicago's Wrigley Field. What about it, Mike? Did you actually hit a 500-foot home run?
That's a bunch of crap, Bill.
Yeah. Okay.
That's like a fish I caught, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Every year the fish gets bigger. Bill, I can't remember. I mean, I've heard talk about some of my home runs in college, but I don't remember, anything like that. I truly don't, and I think it's just a story that's grown over time. I mean, balls and bats we used back then. Are you kidding? There's no way I hit a ball that far. Now, it might have looked that far, or it might have been just something that people have grabbed onto and exaggerated over the years, but I don't think it warrants any time for discussion.
Well, Bill, I think, Mike brought up a really good point earlier in this discussion. How on earth do you calculate these things? And by your own admission, your methodology of gauging home run distances has changed over the years. So even though most of Mike's home runs you've identified travel between 320 and 450 feet, could there have been some home runs that traveled even further because your methodology is?
Of course.
Okay.
It's not exact as they try to do it today, but I want to put a caveat out there. I'm grateful to the folks at StatCast, but their methodology is not reliable. They use a kind of a radar system. They point it out towards center field, and they have a problem with balls hit down the left field line and the right field line. It's a good system, but it's not perfect. How do you do it? With a lot of hard work. You learn from the scientists. You ask them about the physics of a batted ball, and they give you some rough guidelines. And then you either see the home run, or in my case, if you're looking at something that Babe Ruth hit back in the 1920s, then you got to get the blueprints to the stadium, and then you get the eyewitness accounts, and you match them against the physics. And I would say in most cases, you probably can come within 10 feet, and it gives baseball fans a rough guideline about a guy's power. And then in Mike's case, when you're talking about, what is it, Mike, 12 gold gloves? A guy playing a skill position?
I think it's 10.
10?
It's 10.
10. Okay, 10. And, I guess it was 12 silver sluggers, though, right, Mike? So I know that number stuck out with me. And you're talking about a guy playing a skill position, hits 548 home runs, and about 30 of them went over 450 feet. That's why the man's in the Hall of Fame.
I have my doubts also about some of the distances that StatCast spits out while we're broadcasting games. I mean, I've seen balls hit down the line, over the 325 or 30 marker, 15 rows up, and they'll come back and say I went 410 feet. There's no way that ball went 410 feet. Sometimes. So it's interesting for me to hear, Bill, that you say it's not an exact science.
It's not. I think MLB is going to try to improve on it a little bit, because when they talk about the long ones, and I don't want to mention any names of players who've been credited with them who actually didn't do it because it's not their fault. I don't want to embarrass them. But they've got a couple out there from this year and last year that they computed it over 500 feet, and it just didn't happen. I'm sure.
I would like to ask you actually two questions. The first one being, both of you guys, am I crazy, or have I bought into the phenomenon that the new ball is affecting home run totals this year? I mean, I just did a long piece for the Associated Press talking about the home run era that we're in now, on what's causing it, why we should learn to live with it, so on and so forth. And when I'm watching these games now, it just seems every time outfielders are going back, they're going back. fly ball, back. They're either caught right against the fence or they're 10 rows up. I mean, there are no short fly balls anymore. And are you guys getting that sense when you're watching the postseason that ballparks seem to be shrinking?
Oh, definitely. And I think, obviously, the ball's juiced. I mean, think about it. Home runs put fannies in the seats. And now that we're post-steroids era, well, in Major League Baseball at least, they got to have a juice ball. I mean, that's what is going to excite people. Even the whole revolution in changing is the uppercut. Bill,
I mean, I understand that whole process that they're coaching ball in the air versus ball on the ground. I understand that, and I understand why they are doing it, and I necessarily agree with it, but I understand why they are doing it. But just to jump up and say they're playing with a juice ball, I don't know that that's the right answer. I mean, I do know that Pedro Martinez, had visited Cincinnati Park not too long ago, and made it a point to show people that his two fingers will not fit between the seams on the sweet spot of a baseball, and when he pitched, both of his fingers laid on the sweet spot without touching either seam. That's the first time I've ever heard anything specific related to a different baseball and how it's wound. But to me, have the guys in 2 or 3 years become that much stronger?
No, Mike, I think you're on.
Ballparks are shrinking this much, or is it 100% a different baseball?
Oh, I can't answer definitively, Mike, but I think your Pedro Martinez anecdote is very telling, because from my perspective, and I tend to look at things through a somewhat narrow lens because I have my specialty, but I can tell you the optimum distances for home runs over the past few years has not increased. I say not increased. Now, there are some factors which may have fed into that. Some of the longest hitters that we normally have, Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, Joey Gallo, had injuries this year, and that would have drawn that down. But still, there's enough swing variables that you would expect if the ball was juiced, and I'm not saying that it isn't flying a little farther, that we would have seen longer distances. What we're seeing mostly is just more home runs. So I think
because of more balls in the air.
Yeah, that's the coaching and the techniques, and also I think because there have been changes to the balls, and I think it is impacting the way the pitchers are throwing. I don't think they can get quite as much bite on their pitches, which is going to make it easier to center the bat on the ball. So I think there are different factors with the ball playing into the home run surge.
Well, we know that from, what was your other question, Mike?
Oh, the other question was related to the electronic field strike zone over home plate. I know both of you are very familiar with StatCast and how they create that box on TV from the center field camera. And there's been talk about, in fact, I've done recently an article on the electronic strike zone concept. Well, I had that idea back in the early 2000s, when I first saw that box hit on home plate. Well, why can't they do the same thing as tennis and create a way for a field over home plate to ring a bell on an umpire's ear and make the ball strike calls 100% exact, a 100% exact science. And I was wondering what you guys' take on that was.
Bill?
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Obviously, the efficiency would improve. That would be the good thing. The downside, of course, would be the lack of continuity. A lot of people see baseball as a pastoral type enterprise, father to son and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of change might have an adverse effect in that regard. So I think it would be a trade-off. I can see some good results along with some bad results.
So if the father is sitting with the son at the stadium and, there's a home run and then there's 5 strikeouts in a row and the ball isn't put in play and the kid's getting bored sitting there because, there aren't any singles or base on balls, and then there's a home run and then there's 3 or 4 strikeouts in a row and they cheer for the home run and then they're bored during the strikeouts, is that something that the father can hand down to the son about the path that baseball's headed in?
I wouldn't think so, Mike. But
doesn't the father want to sit there with the son and have a score sheet and show him how to, to mark a single down and a guy got on base in an error and what you do at the end of the inning and how to fill in the blank if there's a run scored, et cetera, and I'm getting to the point where I'm thinking that relationship, father-son, or the charm of the game of baseball is starting to go away.
I'm afraid you're right. I think it is too. And I personally, and that's all that it is, I'm not speaking as a historian here, I personally would like to hang on to it.
Well, I'm a purist. I won't apologize for that. I did read your article, Mike. One of the points you made was that increasingly baseball is abandoning the human element and human error. And I think what made the game so beautiful was just that, that we didn't have to have replays. We didn't have to call in New York. We didn't speed up the game with 30 seconds between pitches and everything else. That it gave fathers and sons time to talk. The game breathed more. And now it's all about speeding up, fast pace. You're losing that human touch and that human fallibility. And it's the same thing with analytics. I really regret this movement. But as you also pointed out on this podcast before, these things move in cycles. And sooner or later, I can't believe that things like analytics and the uppercut is going to take precedence over basically winning ball games and playing situational ball to do it. I mean, I'd much rather win ball games than have an uppercut swing and, hit a great home run but lose the game. Doesn't make any sense. So, a good day anymore, my impression is 3 strikeouts and a home run. Yeah. Well, that's what it's become. Mike, one of the criticisms you've had to endure during your playing days was that you didn't hit in the clutch. I'm happy to inform you, after putting your 548 home runs on an Excel spreadsheet, that only 215 of your 548 homers were hit when the Phillies were ahead in a game. On the other hand, 333 of your homers were hit when the Phillies were behind in the game or the game was tied. And of those 333 homers, 294 either gave the Phillies the lead in the game at the time it was hit and or was responsible for the margin of a Phillies victory. So you have the satisfaction of knowing, although you're pushing 70 or you're 70, that you did in fact hit in the clutch, which I found, fascinating that you always had to fight that.
Well, you can get like a stigma pinned on you as a player, and I wouldn't 100% disagree with that. I've always had a sense that I should have been a much better hitter in the clutch. If you look at my All-Star game performances, my postseason performances, they were either really good or, not so good. I had in 2 World Series, and one I went 1 for 20, and the other one I went, 7 for 14 or something like that. I'm not sure what the exact numbers were, but, they're really good, and I was calm and relaxed and playing well, or I was pressing like crazy. And in general, up until the 86 and 87 season, where I thought I was a really good clutch hitter and I wanted to be out the game on the line and 2 outs and a man on second, most of my career, my batting style didn't match with that kind of hitter. In other words, Greg Luzinski hit around 300 when he was in his prime almost every year. It's because he could hit with 2 strikes. He'd break his bat and fight a ball off over second, and he'd hit the ball the opposite field. He had a real tight, short stroke for a big guy. whereas I was much more susceptible to the strikeout. I had more holes in my swing, and I could become anxious and try too hard and had some fear of failure and all that. So you're talking about home runs. And, most of my career I found it much easier to hit a home run to win a game than I did hit a single to win a game. So I think that has to be explained to people when you say that. I appreciate you saying that I hit a lot of clutch home runs, but if you want to break it down, if you really want to break it down, I think that label is not 100% false. I think that there is something to that label.
Bill, what do you think?
I agree with you, Bill, and it goes beyond the numbers. I'm here as a historian. I'm also here as a Philly and a Mike Schmidt fan, and I watched almost every game the man ever played, and I know everybody in our family always regarded Mike as a very good clutch hitter. Couldn't wait for him to come to bat with the game on the line. That's my take.
Well, everybody couldn't wait for me to come to bat, but not everybody was too thrilled about that. After the at bat, I remember the night when I struck out 4 times on 12 pitches, and the last 2 times I came up and the game was on the line both times, and luckily I struck out on 8 pitches, on 6 pitches the last 2 at bats, and I got booed all the way back into the dugout. But, where was the clutch hitting that particular night? There was none until the 13th pitch was thrown in extra innings, and I hit it for a home run. I became pretty clutch real quick.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on a second. Take a look at Bryce Harper. He hits very well in the clutch. He was, the second top hitter in MLB this year in the clutch? What his average was? I forget what his average was, but he was good. And there are times I've seen him that he failed in the clutch, but he doesn't get booed.
Oh, yeah. You're going to fail more than you succeed in the clutch.
Right.
There's no question about that. No question. And some of us feel it. Some of us feel the failure more than others. I think Bryce Harper has a fantastic attitude about that. I really do. I think he accepts it. He when he comes up there in the clutch, he'll give you that grand slam that he hit, one of the biggest at bats of the year at the Vet, is going to be a memorable moment to Phillies fans forever. But Bryce had been up probably 10 other times in similar situations and struck out or made an out. And Bryce will give you a real good at bat, in a pressure situation. And I don't think about myself is that my at bats could have been a lot better.
Right, but I don't think that's why. Yeah, I don't think that's why he doesn't get booed and you did. I think it was the kind of people you are and your approach to the game. I mean, you got to admit this. I mean, people couldn't see how hard you worked because you came across as the natural. And everything came easy to you. So there was an expectation there that every time you were going to be up, you were going to succeed. Well, Harper shows emotion.
I would agree with that.
Harper, and that's where the booings come. That's where the booing came from. And I'll be damned. I think it was Bob Costas that finally mentioned it in 1986 on national TV. You were getting booed, and he said, I can't believe it. This guy has a Hall of Fame career, and the hometown fans are booing him. And I noticed, I paid attention to that. The booing slowly wore away after that, because that
yeah, I would agree with that, and I think your assessment of my relationship with fans is spot on. I would say that Bryce on the field is the exact opposite of a player that I was, and I truly wish I would have been more, had more of Bryce's personality in me. The connection he's made with the fans is unbelievable. He has no, probably one of my problems was my insecurity on the field. I mean, I really never wanted to do anything to make the game harder than it was, and I always felt like if I brought attention to myself on the field by antics, by flipping the bat, by showing off in some fashion, which has become very much a part of the game today. The gesturing to the crowd, the dances that they do on the field, all that kind of stuff. But including the crowd, the fans into the game is what Bryce Harper does. He brings them out on the field. I never did that at one moment throughout my career, and I think that was, that's where a lot of my burden over time with the Philly fans came from. And I believe, I believe that right now, at this moment, over, let's just say in the last 10, 15 years, I believe it's just a wonderful, wonderful relationship that I have with Philadelphia fans, and I wouldn't change it a bit. I just, you look back at earlier in your life, and there's some things you might have done differently. And, if I could look back, I would have changed my personality on the field in a second.
Mm-hmm. Well, that actually wraps this up real nicely, because my last question here refers to a column that you wrote last year that was published by the Associated Press. And in that column, you addressed the decline of hitting in MLB today, and you attributed the decline to several factors, including analytics and the new benchmarks for hitting. What you wrote, and I quote, "Back in the 80s, the benchmark for being a great hitter was 300. If you hit 280 with 30 home runs and 100 RBIs, you were an elite power hitter. But today's hitters are concerned about launch angle, swing speed, and exit velocity. Why? Because it's the world they live in. I've heard it said by a general manager, I've heard it said by a GM of a hitter who is 0 for 15 that he's okay because his launch angle is perfect. The old school hitting coach would say, son, you're pulling off the ball, or you're not keeping your hands back. The difference between hitters of your era and today, you conclude, is accountability. Or as you put it, hitters back in the day had feel, and the good ones could stop slumps before they got out of hand with simple corrections. They were never cajoled. They were accountable. I keep on coming back to Rhys Hoskins now when I'm reading those words, because he wasn't able to get out of his slump. And clearly accountability added pressure to your career, Mike. Do you think it enabled you to hit those 548 career home runs, or do you think you would have hit even more home runs today without that same accountability?
Well, that's a long one. That's a pretty involved question. It's an interesting question. It's a good question. I could never say that I should have been better than I was. I mean, I think that I was as good. I had the career that I had because of my desire to be great through reinvention, experimentation, willingness, try things, drive, pregame preparation, thinking on the field, anticipating pitches, knowing the pitchers. Just all of those things combined drove me to want to be the best player. I was making most money in baseball, so I always felt like I should be the best player in the league. I mean, I always felt like when they put the stats in the paper, mine should be in there every day, not just on Sunday. Which back in the day, they had the league leaders under the standings every day in the paper, and I wasn't comfortable unless my name was there in the league leaders, and if it wasn't, I had to do something about that. But just figuring it out. I think that I had a knack for figuring it out. Now, other guys just go. They just go. They know they have their stroke. They believe in it, and they just go. Same routine every day. Just wind themselves up and go. And a lot of them are really good that go that way. I didn't have that wind myself up and go attitude. I had, this is a heady game, and I want to outfox that guy out there. And I'm always thinking about, ways to do it better. I always watch guys that hit the ball to right field, and why couldn't I hit the ball to right field? And I learned to hit the ball to right field. Why couldn't I hit a slider? And I learned to hit the slider. Why can't I cut my strikeouts in half? And I cut my strikeouts in half. So a lot of things in that game I didn't come into the game able to do, but I pretty much was able to do all of them when I left the game.
Mm-hmm. Bill, the two of us have talked about really kind of two careers that Mike had. The second part of his career, especially in the mid moving into the mid 80s, he was more focused on hitting for average, whereas he was a pull the ball power hitter before that. In your study of these home run hitters, has there been anyone else who has made that decisive a change in their approach? Can you compare Mike with anybody else?
I'd have to think about that, Bill. It's a really good question. The only thing that comes to mind immediately is Willie Mays, because of the ballpark factor. It's a different dynamic, but we're talking about a guy who, in order to stay at the top of his game, changed his swing. And as most people from that era remember, Candlestick Park, the wind would start blowing in really hard from left field in late afternoon. And Willie, and I'm not the only one he talked to about this, it's a pretty famous part of his game. He literally became an opposite field hitter when the wind started blowing to right field, because it was basically humanly impossible to hit a ball out of the park to left field against a 40-mile-an-hour wind. So that's one that comes to my mind about somebody over time fashioning a new type of swing in order to make his game as good as it could be. But I'd have to think more about that.
Well, I got to admit, I'm glad Mike was always a Philly, but I can't help but imagine what his final stats would have been like if he played his entire career at Wrigley Field. 50 home runs.
Park.
Yeah, or Citizens Bank Park now, right. But 50 home runs on the road in Wrigley, followed by Jerry, which is later Olympic Park in Montreal, 32, Riverfront in Cincinnati, but that's close to home, Dayton, 29, Candlestick only 11. That was a hard park to hit in, I guess because of the wind and everything else. But yeah, I mean, I think you would have been your numbers would have been a hell of a lot better if you were playing in this day and age. And as I think, Mike, you told me before, you probably enjoy it a lot more too, because the accountability wasn't there. So.
Well, Bill, I wouldn't say I was a guy that didn't like accountability. I mean, I think accountability is a great thing. I think that's a great word, accountability, and it's tough to discipline players nowadays. Much tougher than it was 30, 40 years ago. And
let me ask you, what would you do with a guy like Rhys Hoskins?
Oh, you're talking about accountability in terms of just slumping for an extended period of time. I thought I was talking more about accountability for lack of hustle on the field.
No.
Throwing to the wrong base.
Yeah, we agree on that.
Oh, no, I don't really have an opinion one way or the other with Rhys. I mean, I think he's going to be similar to my first full year, right? You said you gave the numbers earlier, 196. So, Rhys had turned that whole thing around and probably will next year and end up on the All-Star team and, be a 45 home run guy with 130 RBIs. I mean, he should be that kind of hitter. I mean, I don't think it can just happen. I think Rhys is going to have to make a couple of small tweaks in his approach to hitting. And we'll see who the new hitting coach is and all of that. So, but no, I have no worries at all about Rhys Hoskins, and I would not look at the term accountability and apply anything to Rhys Hoskins.
Okay, well, thank you, both you gentlemen. It's been wonderful. We've been speaking with Phillies Hall of Famer Mike Schmidt about his 548 career home runs, and Bill Jenkinson, MLB's official home run historian, who's researched each one of Schmidt's career home runs. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us.
Well, thanks for including
me.
me.
Bill, very nice to talk with you guys and reminisce about home runs. It made me feel pretty good about my baseball career. I appreciate that. And Bill Jenkinson, down the road, I hope to meet you again and pick up on that other conversation.
Sounds good, Mike. Thanks for the memories.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Be well.
See ya. Thank you, Philly fans, for tuning in. See you next week for another podcast of Philadelphia baseball, past, present, personal. This is Bill Kashatus, rounding third and heading home on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned Network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.